welcome to the Content Formula webinar on Yammer. We're great to kind of welcome you guys. So just to kind of give an explanation as to what we're talking about today, we're talking about the best practices for Yammer and how to roll it out. We're going to go through by explaining what Yammer is and cover the best practices as well of Yammer. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Yammer configuration and technical setup as well. And then there'll be some polls and some time for some questions as well at the end. But just to, I guess, to kick things off, we'll do some introductions, obviously, to explain who the panelists are and who Content Formula are, for those of you who don't know. So I guess I'll start things off. My name's Alex. I'm kind of going to be the presenter for the webinar today. And I'm actually an account manager at Content Formula. So I'm in charge of kind of getting involved in the early stages of accounts and then managing those accounts going forward. So yeah, really looking forward to kind of showing you guys what we've got to show you on Yammer. And I'll hand over to John to introduce himself and Content Formula.
Thanks, Alex. I think you just need to go into slideshow mode there, by the way, on the deck. Cool, thanks. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm John Scott. I'm the head of user experience at Content Formula, and just to kind of a few bits, points of intro on us as a company. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, great. So we're a digital workplace consultancy founded in 2005. So basically that means we've delivered and supported hundreds basically of intranets and digital workplace apps, and we've won a few awards along the way. And today we're going to be talking about just Yammer, of course, which is part of what we do. And we have Richard with us, who is a consultant who works for works with Content Formula, and has a lot of Yammer experience, and he'll give you some more info on that in a second. And earlier this month, we just finished together a Yammer launch for a 25,000 employee company, big company. So there's some very recent, learnings as well that we've kind of weaved into today. So we hope the webinar in itself today will be useful to you thinking about rolling out Yammer, or even if you have already. But if you need more help, then please, of course, do get in touch, because we can help you with absolutely sort of any of the stuff we talk about today. So head to www.contentformula.com and reach out, or send an email to hello@contentformula.com. There'll be those kind of up on the screen at the end. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I think I'll hand over to Joe to do his intro. Go ahead, Joe.
Cool, thanks, John. Yeah, so I'm Joe Perry. I am a technical director at Content Formula. So I work with a variety of software, Yammer being one of them, but obviously the rest of Microsoft 365, so Teams, SharePoint, is really where we consider ourselves experts in. I'll hand you over to Richard as well. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Joe. Hey, everybody. I'm Richard Gera. I'm a consultant, and I specialize in digital communications, internal communications, endpoint communications, etc. And what I do is help organizations get the best value out of technology in support of their strategic objectives.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Richard. So as I mentioned, yeah, we've got a poll that we wanted to kind of kick things off with. So I'll just kind of share this with you guys now. So the question is, what is your interest in Yammer? So I'll just launch that. So that should be on your screen now. So the options are: we're launching Yammer, we're looking at relaunching Yammer, we're considering using Yammer, we've launched Yammer and it hasn't taken off, or we've launched Yammer and we want to get more out of it. So at the moment, actually the majority looking like you're considering using Yammer. There's a couple of people who are looking at relaunching, and about 34% at the moment saying we've launched Yammer and we want to get more out of it. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll let that go on for another.
That's quite common. We hear that quite a lot, yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. I will close that down. I'll just give it another sort of 10 seconds. It looks like the majority of people have voted, but if anyone else wants to drop in a vote now, I'll give it another few seconds. Okay. Okay, great. You guys see my screen again, just to confirm?
Yep, we see it.
Yep. Cool. Okay, great. So, John, yeah, I guess I'll hand over to you to kind of introduce us and kind of describe what Yammer is.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, please, Alex. That's it, great. So yeah, obviously some of you may already be pretty familiar with this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page and everyone, you know, is kind of seeing things from the same perspective here. What is Yammer? Yammer is a collaboration tool that helps you to connect and engage with people across the organization fundamentally. So in Yammer, you can start conversations, you can ask questions, you can share knowledge, you can build communities. And you know, some people refer to Yammer as enterprise social networking or enterprise social collaboration, which is fine, perfectly good sort of monikers for it. But one kind of, I guess, caveat is that the word social in there can be a bit of a trigger word for some. So particularly some executives who get visions of people chatting all day with their colleagues on a company version of a Facebook, and we'll talk more about that later. So actually the word social in enterprise social networking really is intended to be a synonym for, it's not intended, sorry, to be a synonym for non-work or leisure activity, leisure time, but in fact it just indicates that it's a platform for interacting directly with other people, and that it facilitates connecting with people to share knowledge. So that's why it's called social. It's in those terms it's meant. So yeah, next slide please, Alex. Now, Yammer is one of many apps within Microsoft 365, of course. It sits alongside the likes of Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, Outlook Online, etc. And because of the way Microsoft 365 apps work, there is some overlap in terms of what they can do. So if you like golf, it's a bit like selecting a golf club. There's often a few clubs that you could use for a shot, but there's usually one ideal club for a particular shot. Or to give another analogy, you know, you could eat your breakfast, your cornflakes, with a small teaspoon. It would work. You could do it, but there's actually an ideal option in that case, which is the dessert spoon. So you know, sometimes people will use these apps differently, and that's fine. To some extent, we need to embrace that. But there are some things that, you know, may help in identifying generally the right app to use and when. And one question that always comes up is when you use Yammer versus Teams. What's the difference between Teams and Yammer? So if you go to the next slide, Alex, let's talk about that for a second. So we've got an analogy here as depicted in this infographic with the differences between Teams and Yammer. And if you think of a large conference or trade show, and if you think about Yammer as the sort of what Microsoft call the outer loop, the sort of the area around the conference hall that has these sort of booths set up that you can wander around. You can basically walk around the show floor, and you can generally choose to join different groups and engage when it suits you. You know, you can walk up to a booth and have a chat with the person on the booth or other people around the booth. You could join a short demonstration, like kind of a live event. And you know, these kind of booths and these areas are usually completely open. You can just rock up and get involved, ask questions, share your thoughts, interact with people that you kind of don't know, and you've just sort of serendipitously bumped into, but they may have shared interests or knowledge that could be useful to you. So that's the sort of the outer loop, the Yammer side of things. Whereas Teams is a bit more like the sort of center breakout rooms where maybe you've had to book a place and your name has to be on a list, and you go in and you've got a typically smaller group of people that you're doing something with, either again watching a demonstration or a kind of a video or something like that, or having a meeting or having a workshop. But you know, there's a kind of a defined list of attendees. And also one of the other things that with Teams you can do is include externals. So external partners can join into those sessions as well via Teams. And with Yammer, the live events in Yammer, you can't do that with people outside your organization. And Teams typically is a bit more formal and structured. You know, it's better for document management, for example. Again, you can share documents in Yammer, but it's not set up to be quite as controlled and granular in terms of the control you give to documents. So there are some differences there. So yeah, next slide, please, Alex. And what about accessing Yammer? So how can your employees access Yammer? Where can you reach them? Looking at it from the other angle, where can you reach them with Yammer content? There's 4 main places really. There's Yammer itself, the site in the web browser, the mobile app, within the Teams app, and or embedded in the intranet itself. So if we go to the next slide, let's look at the first one of those. We've got here the Yammer web interface. So if you open up Yammer directly in the browser, this is what you see. This is the Yammer interface. You can't customize this, but obviously you can add communities on the left there and build out your own company structure in terms of the communities that exist. And you can do everything that you can do in Yammer, you can do here. Go to the next slide, Alex. And then you've got the sort of native app option as well, so people can access this from a smartphone, for example, using the Yammer app, and that app makes it nice and easy to do some of the things that are typically easier to do from a phone, like upload a video, record a video and upload it. You could do that from the native app, and then you can still post all the normal types of content like polls, announcements and questions and so on. And the next one here is the app within Teams. So there's a Yammer Communities app which you can actually surface within Microsoft Teams, which, you know, before this webinar you may have thought actually that's a bit weird. Why would you surface Yammer inside of Teams? But if you actually think about the different use cases for Teams versus Yammer, if you've got, let's say, the majority of your certainly desk-based workforce primarily based in Teams these days, potentially, it makes sense to be able to surface other apps within Teams. And so that's why the Yammer Communities app exists. You can actually just jump into Yammer from within the Teams interface. And that's from desktop, mobile, or browser-based. And then the last one, next slide, please, is you could embed Yammer into your intranet or your digital workplace hub. So this is an example from a company we've worked with recently called Entain. Here we have the Yammer feed of the individual user, their personal feed on the home page. And then in other places across the intranet, we use embeds of particular communities that are relevant to the content on those pages. So that people can, for example, use Yammer and the communities within Yammer to ask questions about intranet content to the people who are maintaining it. So yeah, there's nice ways to embed that, and the experience for those embeds has changed fairly recently with Microsoft adding a much more kind of like seamless look to it, and it makes it feel much more part of your actual intranet sort of interface rather than it looking a bit like a sort of an add-on. So yeah, so that's great. So yeah, there's just some examples of where you might encounter it, or where you can send people to consume Yammer content. Back to you, Alex, for the next part.
So just a quick question, John, before we move on. You mentioned there kind of you're able to invite guests and externals into Yammer. Is that experience the same for those users? Yeah, so you can have people, externals, being given access to Yammer as guest access, but it does depend on how you're running Yammer. So there are some different modes to run Yammer in, and it does get a bit technical. So Joe's going to talk about that towards the end in terms of the different ways that you can run Yammer. There's like native mode and hybrid and so on, and he'll go into the details there because that does affect whether or not you can do guest access. Okay. Cool, great. So Richard, so I guess over to you to answer kind of how can you ensure that the Yammer works in your organization?
Thanks, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Excellent, great, thank you. Yeah, so thanks to you guys at Content Formula actually for inviting me along. So I wanted to share a few tips based on my experience, which has recently included supporting the deployment of Yammer into the company that John just mentioned. And also I did quite a lot of extensive research of the product for a specialist review that I wrote. So there's lots of great information out there about Yammer actually on the internet. Is the first thing I'd say. So don't be afraid to go off and kind of Google. You can find out a lot of good stuff. What I've tried to do here is focus on a few things that I think maybe don't get talked about as much. And it is focused both on if you are looking to launch Yammer within your organization, but is also relevant if you have already launched Yammer and you're just looking to get more value out of it, or if you've launched it and it hasn't quite gone how you wanted it to, and you want to kind of re-energize it. This should hopefully all be valid to you, valid for you, and a benefit. So if you move to the next slide, please, Alex. So these are the 5 tips. which I'm going to talk for. I'm going to do the first three and then I'm going to hand over to John so you don't get too sick of my voice. So connecting to a strategic theme, allocating and nurturing roles, doing test and learn, or having a test and learn mentality, putting a Yammer at the heart of your own strategy, and then getting leadership involved. So if we look at connecting to a strategic theme first, so with Yammer, like all technology, it's really important that you give it a purpose. You don't want to talk about what Yammer is, what the features are, what Yammer does in the first instance. You need to focus on the value that it's going to bring to your organization. You should put the why before the what. And a good way in which you can do this is by, connecting a Yammer, or what Yammer is and why you're bringing Yammer into your organization, to something that is of strategic relevance and strategic importance to your organization. Right? So ideally this is at the organizational level, and this could be things like innovation or digital transformation. Luckily, most companies these days, they have something in their overall strategy that you'll be able to kind of connect. When you talk about Yammer, you'll be able to connect to it, but it can also work at a more functional level. If you're in an extremely large organization, maybe you're only using Yammer in one part of it. So in terms of the benefits this can do, if we move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is going to provide context, right, for both employees and importantly for leadership. So you're not just saying here's Yammer, you've not just kind of thrown it out there and expect that people understand why they should use it, how they should use it, what its purpose is. You're going to go, okay, I get this, right? This is, the company wants us as employees to be more innovative, more open in sharing ideas, and they've given us, they've invested in a technology solution that can help us to do that, and for leaders as well. And this is important because actually what I've seen of Yammer implementations is employees get it and they want to use it, etc. Leaders don't always get it in the first instance, especially because of how it functions. So if leaders can think, oh, actually there is a valid reason why we've introduced Yammer, that can help an awful lot in terms of implementation and adoption. And then, from sustaining a Yammer implementation perspective, it brings ongoing meaning and motivation, right? So people know why it's there and what they should be using it for. Right? Not the specifics of how they use it, but it's a theme. Right? That's the whole thing, calling it a strategic theme. And if you have that in mind and you kind of reinforce that, that can be really helpful. So a good example of that would be, if your CEO or your head of marketing is giving a quarterly town hall and they're talking about the strategy, they can say, and this has been a hot topic on Yammer. It really connects the use of the product to the strategic goal of the organization, and it gives a real sense of both kind of its value and also that it's okay to use it. And that's really, really important. You need to signal to your organization, we want you to use this tool, it's okay to use it. And that gives you the kind of the third tip, if you like, which is the value for the organization. You should be able to see that, and you can get quite advanced. Well, there's basic analytics functionality within Yammer, and there are lots of more advanced options out there. And Content Formula and I have helped kind of other companies look at those, but you don't necessarily need that. You can just look and you can see the sorts of conversations that are going on, and the value is there and it's obvious. It gives you a real sense of what's happening within the organization. So that is the first tip, connecting to a strategic theme. Alex, I don't know if people are putting in questions or anything. I'll just pause in case I have to move on.
Nothing at the moment, but it's a good opportunity for me to say, like, anyone obviously who's attending the webinar, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to kind of post them in. I'm kind of reviewing everything as we go through, so if there are any questions, I can ask the panelists and we can try and either answer at the end, or if it's a good opportunity throughout the webinar, we'll just jump in and ask that question. So please feel free to post questions throughout. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks. So moving on to tip number 2, which is allocate and nurture roles. So having formal roles within setting up Yammer is important because it provides some structure. It's not a product where you just want to say, here's Yammer and expect your organization to self-assemble around it. So allocating roles, it's important. It kind of empowers people, and it gives the people involved a sense of shared responsibility for the success of Yammer within the organization. And that's important both from an implementation perspective, but also in terms of its ongoing health and value that it gives to the organization. So a couple of examples of roles. So there are a few, but the two I'd probably call out. So the first is the community admin. So within Yammer is made up of communities, and every community has an admin. It can have more than one admin. We use it as a lead admin for each community, and they can do things like managing posts. So they can close posts, they can pin posts. They can convert posts, which is quite a cool feature. So if someone does just a normal conversation post, but actually it's a question, the community admin can convert it to be a question. They can also manage the users for their community. But beyond the functional stuff, they're kind of responsible for the health of that community and how successful it is. So sharing things like best practice examples, or encouraging the right kind of behaviours within a community. Is part of that role as well. So it's partly functional and partly mini kind of governance, if you like, partly just helping to make sure that things are a success. So that's the community admin. And then the other role that I would call out, which is probably for me the most important one, is the business network admin. So you can think of this almost as like the super community user. So they can do everything that a community admin can do, but they can do it for every community. But then they also kind of have control of things like the look and feel of the overall Yammer interface. You can't customize it much, but there are a couple of options there. And they can also manage users at a global level, or a network level. So a Yammer instance is known as a network. And kind of like similar to the community admins, they're also responsible for kind of the overall ethos of the Yammer instance, what's expected, and things like governance and dealing with moderation and that kind of thing. So they are kind of two really important roles that I would encourage you to formalize, right, and give them to people and make people feel proud to be given those roles and see it as an opportunity. Just talk about some of the benefits of those doing that. So if we move on to the next slide. So some examples of the benefits. So what it's going to do is going to enable you to make effective decisions, make fast decisions. So with any technology implementation within an organization, being able to do fast, effective decision making is critical to success. So by having individuals in these roles, they're really going to get to understand the product, the nuances of it, and understand all the different features. But they also understand your business. So they can take those two things and they can come and help you understand how you should make decisions about how you should set things up. It's also going to enable you to support this new way of working. So working with Yammer is different. Everybody becomes a communicator. Everybody has the option to post content. So you are going to run into things that might need to be moderated, or considered. If someone posts something and you're not sure if it's appropriate or not. So this provides kind of a reporting structure, if you like, that enables you to do that. And the third and probably most important benefit from my perspective is that it builds digital capability. Right? So you're allocating these people your roles and you're saying, this is new, this is different. We want you to go off, find out about this, find out what it takes to be brilliant at Yammer. And then it kind of instills that core of digital is important. And most organizations recognize the importance of digital now. Increasingly it's how businesses are run. Right? So this is a real opportunity. And also beyond kind of the technical stuff, from a communications perspective, if you're in an internal communications function or you're a head of IC, this is critical, because this is how people consume content now. Right? They don't read big long news articles, etc. They want thumbable content, and Yammer provides thumbable content. So the people who are your community admins, your business network admins, and they understand what thumbable content is and what good online content looks like, they are going to be critical in order to help you evolve your function so that it can continue to perform. So that's the second tip: allocate and nurture roles. Pause. Doesn't look like we've got any questions, so I'll move on to the third question, one.
Actually, that term thumbable content.
Are you allowed to ask a question, John?
Yeah, sorry, this is I'm going off piste. That term thumbable content? I just because I've heard
Yep.
that used before, but I just what does it mean? What do you mean by that?
Right, so great question. So the thumbable content is essentially, if you think about a modern apps like Facebook, Instagram, etc., etc. What you do is you have kind of a feed of content, which is posts that have come from people that you follow, etc., etc. You know, that's kind of how the mechanic most of it works. Right. And you can control what you're looking at. And you can also engage with it, you know, through a simple like or share or something like that with your thumb, right? But the most important part of it is that if you see something that you're not interested in, it's incredibly easy to get rid of it, because you just you just flick away from it. So in a business context, if you're putting a post into Yammer, let's say you're a leader, for example, and you want to put a post in Yammer, you want people to read it. If you're writing it the same way it's been written before, people aren't their thumbs are going to decide, right? So you make it something that makes your audience's thumb pause on it is what you're looking for.
Yep, great.
Cool, great question. Cool. So third one, last one before I hand over to John. I keep saying that because I forgot to do it in one of the test runs, just full disclosure. Is test and learn. So this is really, really important. So Yammer is different in the way it functions, maybe from a lot of technology that you've had in your organization before. As I've mentioned before, kind of anybody can post content. I think Microsoft called it, kind of democratic software. But it's going to mean that, it's going to be something that's going to be different in terms of how it's used and how it works and what happens with it in your organization. So the way in which you can help to understand that and work out what you need to do in order to make it successful is to be brave and to try different things out. So the core concept of test and learn is there's no kind of fail. All right, so you try something, you don't have to be confident that it's going to work. You want to have an idea that it's going to work, but if it doesn't work, that's okay. In fact, that's actually good, because you're going to learn probably more from something that doesn't work from something that does. What's important is that you take those learnings and you use them to refine your approach moving forward. So this one I'm going to do slightly different rather than kind of benefits. So if we move to the next slide. So I wanted to kill two birds with one stone. So this is the kind of Yammer implementation model that I developed and used. And this is what I used with Content Formula. And so I wanted to talk about it in the context of test and learn. So if you're looking to implement Yammer within your organization, what you want to start with is the people closest to you, right? So we talked about the business network admin, your first couple of community admins, maybe your internal communications team or IT team, but it's very, very small, right? A few people, and that's when you're going to learn about some of the basics, right? So how does it actually work? What do the features do? Things like mobile access, which can be nuanced based on the mobile capabilities and what your organization does around mobile and information security. So you're going to start to learn some of the really kind of basic stuff at that first point. So then you're going to move up to your second point, which is what I call champions and challengers. So your champions are the people in your organization who are going to love Yammer and they're going to tell other people that Yammer is great. Your challengers are going to do the flip. They're the people in your organization who go, don't get this, don't need another thing, don't understand it, don't get the purpose of it. You want to get those people in early, get them using the product and listen to what they are telling you, because the champions are going to tell you about the great things, how they're choosing to use it, and they're the things that you want to reinforce and promote as part of launching. And the challengers are going to give you the gripes. They're going to say, I got too many emails, when I registered. That's really, really important. You need to consider that as you move forward. So once you've done your champion and challenges, the third is tribe. So this is when you're scaling up to like a part of your business, like a function or maybe even a country or something like that. But this is when you're doing it kind of, you're scaling for the first time. And test and learn. So an example of that would be around things like community organization and community structure. You'll start to see, how many people are creating work-related communities versus non-work related communities, etc. Actually, just an aside on that. So, you might not know about Yammer is recently there was a change which enables you to control who can create communities. So you didn't used to be able to do that. But Joe's going to talk in a little while about native mode, and that's actually one of the options that become available to you when you put your Yammer instance into native mode. So tribes is kind of, you're doing it at scale for the first time, but again, you're taking all the learnings from the previous two and testing them. And then you get to the organizational level, you roll it out. Don't stop there. So even once it's out to the whole organization, everybody's using it on a day-to-day basis, you should not stop trying new things, right? So it's things like live events. John talked earlier about the integration capabilities between Yammer and Teams and Yammer and SharePoint. That's a really great one, right? So if you think about how can you take trending content that's within your Yammer network and promote it on your SharePoint intranet homepage, right? Try that, see what people say about it, see what analytics you get from it. Don't ever stop trying out new things or thinking of different ways that you can use the product in order to drive engagement and support that strategic theme that you have linked to. So that's the third tip, test and learn. I will now hand over to the very handsome.
Just a quick question, Richard. Tribes,
yes.
That could be like a function or a location, right?
Right, exactly that. Yeah. It's big, it's chunky, it's difficult because you could have an organization where the whole organization is 500 people, or it could be 500,000 people. So it really depends on the organization. But you're going with one or more kind of big cohorts of people. So they might work, yeah, exactly, function, country, because that gives you things like language, right? So maybe at the tribe level is when you want to look at introducing it to someone where the English isn't their first language, especially if you're looking to connect and use the machine translation service, which is offered as part of the kind of Microsoft capability. Yeah.
Okay,
great question again. Nice.
So we do have a couple of questions that are coming through. And I think some of them we're potentially going to answer later on in the webinar, but there's one here that kind of says, are there any kind of classic learnings that potentially could be interpreted before each stage of kind of these tests and learns stages?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think actually, so one of the things I mentioned as an example was with the challenges and email notifications, and that's an experience that I had in an implementation that I supported. Was I had a few people come in and say, we didn't like the fact we got email at the point where we were given access to Yammer. And that in part was driven from kind of Yammer was being pitched as something that would help to reduce the use of email within the organization. So kind of heard that, but we didn't really think it was important. And it turned out it was. And it didn't ruin the launch, but let's just say I would have been a lot happier if I'd have listened to that and truly considered what that might mean if it happened to a lot more people. So that would be my classic learning. Would be when you learn things from testing, from doing experiments and testing things out, be thoughtful about that learning and interpret that learning in terms of what it might mean as you scale out more broadly within your organization.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, great question.
So John, I think you're going to pick up the next section.
Yeah. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to talk now about putting Yammer at the heart of your strategy. So if you could just go to the next slide again, please, Alex. So what we actually mean when we say put Yammer at the heart of your strategy is we mean use it prevalently, use it very visibly, both as a vehicle to communicate, but also deliver upon that strategy. So these three things that we see on the screen now are important in doing that. So planning to use Yammer effectively, making sure you've got a pipeline of content to publish there. Not just doing things ad hoc. Doing things ad hoc is good too, in addition, but treating Yammer as a serious publishing medium is important as well. Then you've got content. Thinking carefully, you need to think carefully about the content that can be shared on Yammer. What content exists out there already in the organization that could be repurposed and shared? Use Yammer to extend its reach, if you like. So if you've got, let's say you've got like a regional intranet section or something like that with some really kind of like interesting content that could be some sort of like marketing approach that could be reused in other markets, for example, or something like that. look for that, be out looking for that kind of content, and then repurpose that and push that through Yammer to reach that bigger audience and add value for that wider audience. So things that are relevant to people are the most valuable things to find and amplify. Amplifying that content will be a big win. And think always about what content is likely to engage the most level of the highest level of feedback and potentially lead to refinement of those ideas and that knowledge, that then may evolve your ideas as a company about the way things should be done or what best practice looks like. Those content items are great, and they're kind of like gold in terms of adding them to Yammer. Then there's also insights, so taking time to read all the responses to posts on Yammer, where possible. I mean, as much as possible, do that at least. Because a single reply that you might look at will rarely give you a complete picture of the employee understanding or sentiment around a given issue, but you could gain a lot of insight by evaluating the collective response. So if you look across a multitude of replies and you get an overall impression of whether or not people are confused by something that's been announced or talked about, or if they're positive or negative about it. And actually, you can take this further. If this becomes, hopefully your Yammer rollout will be so successful that there's just too much of a volume of comments to deal with manually. So that's when you can turn to third-party tools and analytics packages that will allow you to measure things like the reaction types. So did posts get a majority of like or kind of like happy faces or confused faces, because you've kind of got all these different reaction types in Yammer like you have with Facebook, and even tools that can perform sentiment analysis on text, so they can actually read through the responses. The AI, the artificial intelligence, can read through the responses to posts and understand whether or not the feeling, the words used were generally negative or positive, and give you that feedback in a dashboard. So that can be very useful for performing that analysis to get that insight around what might require a follow-up clarification communication, for example, if there is a great deal of confusion about something. And then also, if you go to the next slide, please, Alex. In terms of putting it at the heart of your strategy as well, traditionally senior leaders, for example, may speak about the strategy in videos or meetings or events, and that's about speaking about the strategy. But with Yammer, you can turn that into speaking and listening, because you can encourage feedback from your colleagues, potentially adapt the mechanisms for delivering the strategy, or even maybe the strategy itself. Yammer's the perfect tool for listening to your employees. Everyone, basically, because everyone can have their say at a time that suits them. It's not necessary that they were available at the time that meeting was held and they were there to put their hand up and ask that question or make that clarification. They can pick this up in the evening, late at night, and respond to it and have their say or provide their feedback, because Yammer's it's always on and they can always do that. So it's a great opportunity to be able to elicit that feedback from your employees. Then the second one here, when previously you may have created guidance around activities to deliver on a strategy and just publish those for consumption, Yammer can really allow that guidance to be shared more easily and also adapted based on the shared experiences of employees who've actually tried to follow that guidance. And this kind of feedback loop that can be generated from that will help to it will be crucial actually in being a dynamic organization that evolves constantly and rapidly, which is obviously especially important in the digital age. Then lastly, the copywriting element here, going from copywriting to advising. The role of comms, communications colleagues is often to kind of partly to copyright for leaders and other functions, so that their information can be consumed easily by the employees. But putting Yammer at the heart of your strategy means changing communications, in that case, from just copywriters into more advisors, because as Richard said, anyone becomes a communicator basically to some extent on Yammer, and so the role kind of switches to advising. So advising leaders and employees on how to communicate their ideas and guidance more effectively themselves. A big factor in Yammer success is authenticity and transparency, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. The information should come as much as possible from the horse's mouth, and this makes it seem more real, more personally relevant, more more meaningful. And this is why we're saying that comms should be have a change in emphasis from copywriting and to actually advising, because leaders will need this advice. So next slide, please, Alex. Onto the final circle here. So get leadership involved. And the next one again, please, into the detail. Getting leaders involved can be challenging. It often totally depends on the attitude and understanding of the leader towards enterprise social. As Richard mentioned, some will regard it, they'll latch onto that term social and think of it as a non-work tool, and they actively don't want employees to be using it, and so why would they use it? Why would they get involved with it? So often, well, not that often, but sometimes a significant amount of alignment and education needs to be done prior to a launch. Going back to, I guess, Richard's diagram there, showing the gradual rollout and engaging early on with challengers as well as champions. So often those challengers can be senior leadership, and that's important that we engage with those. So yeah, you need the majority to be on board with the vision, so that needs to be overcome. Once on board, though, it's important to avoid leaders just using Yammer like any other previous communications channel, like email, like town halls, and just performing or putting out content in exactly the same way. If it's treated like that, then it is just another place for people to go and check, which is what people hate and people complain about. So it needs to be different and play to Yammer's strengths, the type of communication that is put there. So there's a few things here that are important. Speed, that it's very quick and easy to post something on Yammer. It doesn't have to be a dictated, proofread press release. It shouldn't be. So there's no excuse for it to be slow in getting on the platform. The discussions should start on Yammer as soon as an event worth talking about has occurred, whether it's something that's been announced or an internal event that took place or is taking place at the time. It should be going on to Yammer quickly, and that will make it feel more valuable to people, absolutely. Then there's authenticity. Nothing says authenticity like posting and responding yourself rather than having things ghost written for you or somebody responding for you on your behalf. And I know that that time demands can be an issue here potentially, but Yammer's ideal for that, because keeping posts brief, to the point, and but as much as possible getting involved and following up on responses in the comments, personally if you're a leader, and also commenting and asking questions against other people's posts. It doesn't have to be polished communication, just typical short form text that where just conveys curiosity and moves the conversation forwards. And the last one here is transparency. Yammer is fantastic tool for kind of working out loud, discussing things with colleagues before they become chapter and verse, before they come ingrained and established ways of doing things. And it makes people feel involved in the creation or formulation of these ideas and ways of doing things, and will dramatically improve engagement in them, in new initiatives or directives. So this working out loud concept is something that can absolutely be applied to Yammer, and is something that you should focus on trying to do. Absolutely. So last slide, please, Alex. That finishes our kind of run through of these 5 major kind of factors that you need to engage with and think about when making Yammer a success. Maybe there's any questions that have come in just on those last points.
Yeah, I mean, Gemma asked a question around kind of leadership, and she says she's kind of built a really good and strong business case against the argument that it's just another tool. But there's a definite obvious gap between kind of senior leaders and wanting to use Yammer, and there is resistance there. So I know you've gone over a few points already, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, or if Richard wanted to add just on how people can overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, so I would say proof of concept immediately springs to mind, going through Richard's stages of kind of scale. and using the early stages to prove the worth. So taking a more focused area of the business or a problem that Yammer could support, the fixing of essentially, or the improvement of, and then kind of making a case study out of that, use it to prove that it does actually work. And if it doesn't, to Richard's point, don't worry, kind of like rejig it, reconfigure it and do something slightly different until you get a formula that works well. Anything to add to that, Richard?
I think you're spot on, John. So you made a great point earlier, which is when you think about those champions and challengers, definitely think about that in the context of leaders. I think, from my experience, leaders, in order to support something, they need to feel confident about it, right? And that it's not going to reflect badly on them, and that could actually be counter to the test and learn piece as well, because the key thing here is you cannot do anything form of digital, certainly digital transformation or any kind of digital change, if you are afraid of getting it wrong, right? Companies like Google and Facebook, etc., they are only as successful as they are because they were not afraid of making mistakes, and they've made huge mistakes, right? So there's a couple of things here. So exactly what John said, right? This proof of concept thing, and don't think about levels. So maybe don't go straight for your C-suite, right, or your top level of executives. Find someone at a regional level or a functional level, but someone with influence, but who is going to be supportive and who is going to get it. And you will have someone like that in your organization, and start with them and get them to work with their team and build out those success stories. And then the other thing that you might need to do is to start think about subtly, how can you start to educate your leadership about digital, and the Yammer is a component of digital. It's about evolving the way organizations work and organizations function, and they should not be afraid of it, they should embrace it, but you need to kind of make them feel safe. So if you do those two things together, it will work, right? And you need to be confident in it and feel that you are doing the right thing for your organization, right? Do make no mistake about it, right? Being brave, trying things like this out, pushing for them, right? Building great business cases, but just don't try and boil the ocean, right? Just do a great business case and then just do this the least amount of work possible in order to demonstrate a benefit, and you get that snowball rolling from a very small ball up. And it's a great question. It's a really, really important part of a successful implementation.
Thanks very much, Richard. I think we should probably move over to Joe. We've got quite a few questions coming in, so thank you so much, guys. We'll try and see if we can get a few in at the end, but I'm going to give Joe the impossible task of speaking about technical configuration with Yammer. So I'll hand over to you, Joe.
Cool, cheers, Alex. Yeah, I'll try and whiz through some of the points here. But yeah, we work on a lot of Yammer integrations, implementations, and so we learn a lot around some of the technical considerations you have to make when doing so. The guys I mentioned earlier on, native mode is one of those things. We do talk to customers about other things as well, such as content migration, moving content from, say, Jive or Facebook Business into Yammer. Absolutely got options there, but I'll kind of talk to you now just a few minutes about native mode. So first up, what is native mode? Basically, it's a way to ensure that all users, groups, and content in your network is backed by Microsoft 365 services. So for example, Active Directory is managing all identities in Yammer. Microsoft Groups is used for community management, and SharePoint for file management, and so on. As of January 2020, all new Yammer networks actually start in native mode. But if your Microsoft 365 tenant was created prior to this, it's likely you're still in what we call non-native mode, where files are not stored in SharePoint, guests are not part of AD, and so on and so forth. Now, native mode makes Yammer content available within Microsoft Compliance Center as part of e-discovery, meaning that Yammer can be built into your existing Microsoft 365 governance strategy. Richard made note of it earlier around kind of who can create Yammer groups and who can't. This moving into native mode gives you much more control and flexibility when it comes to that. And also you'll start to see Yammer appear more contextually across Microsoft 365. So for example, when you're in SharePoint, seeing conversations appearing, perhaps even in email as well, seeing conversations, things that are relevant for you, actually appearing contextually inside other parts of Microsoft 365. So not just Yammer self-contained in its own environment, actually Microsoft 365 all kind of rolling that content up and showing it to you where it thinks it's most relevant. And finally, you'll also get access to upcoming features in Yammer. So one of them being Azure B2B guest access. That's quite a big release that's being deployed at the moment, where you can actually invite other communities to join your community. You can create rules and say that certain parts of the business can go off and join other communities or join your community. So being on native mode is actually going to give you access to more and more features. So what changes can you expect if you are in that non-native mode? And going into native mode? The two main ones are that external groups will no longer be supported. If you've got guests in your network from other companies and other domains, they may potentially lose access to that place. And even their content might be deleted. So there's certainly a consideration there that moving into native mode, you have to kind of think about what content may be lost or what's going to happen with that. There's certainly tools that help you do things with that content or identify what is going to be considered as an external and what isn't, and I'll talk about them shortly. That is certainly one area where kind of there's quite a big change with going to native mode. I'm not saying that guests aren't supported in native mode, it's just the way that guests are handled kind of fundamentally changes. File uploads in private messages as well. In non-native mode, I can private message someone and attach a file. No longer possible inside of the native mode Yammer, and something that has to be considered. It also deletes any previously uploaded files as well. So Yammer's not really about that closed off space. It's more of an open community a lot of the time. There's probably better tools where for sharing of files, private messaging, in that sense. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about how we go about planning and executing your move to Yammer native mode. And obviously the big one is making sure you're eligible. This is quite a big thing in the Yammer world, this move. It's once you've done it, there is no going back. So obviously you need to make sure that you're eligible. And this first point is kind of more of an IT question, as it involves understanding how you manage identity in your organization. It's a core requirement now that you enforce Microsoft identity with that move to native. I mentioned earlier on about AD taking control of users. This is a part of that and something that needs to be considered. You must also only have one Yammer network. So if you have multiple, then there are things you'll also need to think about, splitting out, removing networks, that sort of thing. Absolutely possible to still go into native mode. It's just the planning is larger. And as I mentioned, there's actually tools that help you identify what's going to happen with that migration. So Yammer provides an alignment tool or alignment report, which you can kind of see on the right hand side here, which shows you a view of your organization, your Yammer network, and what will be lost, what will be changing, what will be migrated. And it gives you a good insight into kind of the different steps, the different things that are being kind of transitioned. So for example, users who are externals, not in AD at all, that only have an identity in Yammer, it will show you these people who are potentially going to lose access to Yammer. The tool will also highlight where content may be deleted or removed. So obviously, if we're going to lose content, we're going to have to think about perhaps backing up that data or exporting it in some sense. So there are tools out there that help you straight out of the box actually download your Yammer content locally to create that backup. Now for end users, the changes I've mentioned above may cause obviously some confusion. Your Yammer networks, your Yammer communities are changing, and certainly their experience of Yammer will probably change as part of that native migration, that native mode migration. So developing a communication plan is a great way to help users understand what is happening and what to expect. And we often see organizations using that opportunity of native mode migration to convey the benefits of Yammer communities. So I know that John, or maybe even Richard earlier, mentioned things like live events. People probably don't know a whole lot about live events. And migration with native mode can actually be used to kind of highlight some of the good things that will come out of it. Live events, e-discovery, that contextual experience across all different Microsoft 365 products. So a lot of interesting stuff there to put inside of your comms. It's also worth noting that the migration isn't an instant thing. The bigger the network, so the more content that you've got in your network, the longer the time it takes for migration to complete. So certainly something to think about there around communications. And whilst this is happening, certain features will cease to function. Like there are certain group updates that just won't get pushed out. So letting users know what is happening is really important. So yeah, native mode is an important consideration in Yammer. You should start looking at the alignment tool I've highlighted on the right there to help you understand the current state of your Yammer community. Obviously, it's more of a consideration if you've got content in your Yammer network. If you have no content, if you're not utilizing Yammer, a lot of what I spoke about there is less important. Still, conversation will probably have to be had around guest usage and like enforcing Microsoft identity in the long run, but that migration, that push to native mode is simpler for the most part.
Yeah, I think Joe, that was one of the things that was really interesting and we learned a lot from, was just, so with most Microsoft products, right, you get it and it's there and you use it. But actually the decisions that you make in relation to Yammer have big implications on what features are available and how you can use it, both from kind of a technical perspective, things like e-discovery, but also from a kind of features and day-to-day usage perspective. So I think I just wanted to reinforce the message: don't ignore all that stuff or underestimate it, or maybe let your IT team make all the decisions around it. You need to understand it and make the right decisions so that then you get the most out of the product moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely agree. As you say, you're enabling things that aren't just affecting Yammer now, it's out in the Microsoft 365 world as well. So strategy there is absolutely imperative.
Okay, cool. Great. Thanks a lot, Joe. Challenge accepted. You managed to whistle through that very quickly, so thanks very much. Sadly, I don't think we're going to have time for many questions as we've got to stop at 3, but I can see we've had quite a lot of questions in. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a lot of those questions and we'll reach out to you guys and provide some answers. So thanks so much for kind of logging those in. I think just to kind of finish off, obviously, off the back of this, we'll follow up. But if you guys have any questions about what we've spoken about today, or if you want to find out any more information about Yammer and any consultancy around Yammer, you can contact myself. There's my mobile number and the content formula switchboard number, so you can contact us through there. And you've also got my email address at the bottom. So yeah, so if you want to kind of reach out.
Alex, sorry, can I just say as well, you can add me on LinkedIn. That's where you can usually find me. So feel free, guys. So maybe if you've got questions that don't get answered, hit me on LinkedIn.
Wicked. All right then, thanks very much, Richard. Cheers, guys, for joining. Really appreciate it, and see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Cheers, Richard.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.